they're an excellent hockey family. All right, Ottawa Senators.
Oh,
Boy,
Jesus.
this is something. Shane Pinto, 41-game suspension for sports gambling, even though he wasn't signed and wasn't doing a damn thing. First round pick loss due to the Dadonov situation. And Connor, do you have that situation? Do you know exactly what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you the Cliff Notes version of it. You don't need to go the play-by-play, but a couple years back, the Ottawa Senators traded Evgeny Dadonov to the Vegas Golden Knights. And I was actually listening to a bunch of stuff before we did the show today. During the trade call with the Senators and the Golden Knights at that time, the Golden Knights had asked on the call, does he have any trade protection that we need to be aware of? And the answer from the Senators organization, whoever was representing them on the call, said no. So sometime down the road, the Vegas Golden Knights went to trade Evgeny Dadonov and a second-round pick to the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for John Moore, who they had actually recently got from the Bruins at that time in the Hampus Lindholm deal. When that trade was approved by the NHL, his agent then turned around and said, whoa, we can't have him be traded to the Ducks. That's against his trade protection. And the Vegas Golden Knights turned around and were flabbergasted and were like, what do you mean trade protection? Lo and behold, he did have a no trade list that was provided to the Senators. There was some discussion that it may have not been turned in on time or something along that case. That was proven to be untrue. So the trade between the Golden Knights and the Ducks was then voided. So the Ducks were out a second round draft pick, and Vegas was out of some cap relief at that deadline to make some other moves. Obviously, Dadonov stayed with them and played through the playoffs that year. He actually had a pretty good playoff with them. And then he was traded to Montreal that offseason. So fast forward up until recently, it seems like there's been a huge push from the Vegas Golden Knights camp, either their general manager or their ownership, that they wanted the league to pursue this and issue some type of statement, judgment, and penalty on the Senators, because obviously everybody knows that Vegas has a bad rap of treating their players pretty poorly. And at the time, we all just naturally assumed that this was Vegas being assholes to a player. So they wanted to make that clear and be unfair. So this week it comes out that the Senators are going to lose a first-round pick for their part in this whole debacle. And there was a press conference yesterday that I actually did get the chance to listen to, where Steve Staios and Michael Andlauer, the owner of the Senators, were asked a bunch of questions. And it was pretty obvious that he is completely pissed off at the NHL for what's happened here. And it was clarified that he did know that there was going to be an investigation and something that came out of this, but the league had told him it was nothing serious, nothing to really worry about. So during the press conference yesterday, he made two things that I thought were pretty interesting to keep an eye on and see if anything happens because of it. One being the comment where he said, I don't know if you take a first round draft pick serious or not, but I definitely do. And the second comment, when he was pressed more about the topic, was, I don't know if this was withheld from potential buyers to help drive up the sale price for the previous owners or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty damning for the league.
It does look bad, smell bad, sound bad. Like it's a duck.
All bad.
I mean? It's all bad.
For the people that are listening to this and you're just like, okay, well, this sounds like an owner just being pissed off that he has some consequences for his organization. Michael Andlauer just purchased this team a few months ago for just shy of a whopping $1 billion
Right.
And the league and Gary Bettman did not have the wherewithal to tell him that, hey, we're probably going to dock you a first round pick, and just be open and honest about it.
Right.
And also, he was not aware of the Shane Pinto investigation until a little bit more recently. So that was also withheld from him. And I think kind of added to his frustration leading up into the draft.
Definitely some sort of, it does definitely smells of some sort of inside job, or some, let's just keep it under the rug so that this thing gets done. Because that lasted a little bit. There was a talk about Ryan Reynolds possibly buying the team. There were all these names bandied about. He finally buys the team. And now Pierre Dorion's gone, and Steve Stais is in as interim GM. In those remarks, Andlauer was not disciplined, which I found interesting, because it's almost an admittance of, yeah, you're right. Shut up. You're right.
He's right. That's why he wasn't disciplined.
Yeah, he's not. So that's going to be creative more of a stink if he gets any type of discipline. What are they going to do? Take a second round pick, take the next year's first round pick, and then he gets more pissed.
Fine him $50,000.
Yeah, I mean, if I was, pick is like a top 10.
Yeah, if I was him, I would be absolutely livid. I shell out $1 billion, and you don't have the decency to tell me. He comes in, he gets blindsided, he's on the team for a few months, and then all of a sudden he's got all these things going on around him that he had nothing to do with, no control over, and was made was not made aware of any of it.
No,
it's just absolutely unbelievable to me that the league could do something like that. No disclosure at all about the dealings that's going on behind the scenes of possible outcomes. No, don't worry about it. I mean, first round picks are gold in that league, especially high first round picks.
Sure.
That's how you build championship teams. If you look at Colorado and a lot of the Tampa Bay team, like a lot of those teams had high first round picks that they used to get the core of their team. And missing out on that is a big deal. And for the league to tell them that it wasn't is absolutely mind boggling to me.
Yeah, it is to me too. And it's just a really bad mark on the thing.
Let's put this into perspective too. I've heard this argument in a couple different places. I don't say that I agree with the argument, but this is just going to put into perspective how the league doles out its punishment. Okay. So this error, and we can call it a bookkeeping error. You could say that somebody just voluntarily lied, what have you. The actual consequence of the action is pretty minimal. Like, there's not real damage happening because of this. The Chicago Blackhawks, after the Kyle Beach scenario, fined $2.5 million.
Yeah. And then they were given,
it was 2.5.
And then they were given the number 1 overall pick in the draft.
Right.
If they had taken away their first round draft pick for that scenario, that could have cost them Connor Bedard.
Yeah. Sure. It would have. Yeah.
I mean, people have been all over social media talking about it, saying, a sexual assault.
I apologize. $2 million.
Sexual assault, is less bad, I guess, than whatever the problems were with the Dadonov situation. It's like no trade rights are it's more of a that's worse than sexual assault. And people are like, I can't believe that you would dole out this kind of punishment for Ottawa when you let Chicago basically skate free and easy on.
I think sports leagues have a problem with the line between integrity of the league and normal, humane integrity. Like, they tend to value that more. NFL does this all the time. You're not going to cheat. You're not going to do this or that, or do something that's going to ruin the integrity of the game. But sexual assault or domestic violence and all these other things get a lesser penalty because they fall behind this. We're not the law. So we're not going to do, but if you cheat the system, the NFL system, you cheat the shield, that's different. And I think that professional sports leagues continuously fumble this thing and struggle with it because they're more really worried about the integrity of their own brand and product and game than they are the human aspect of it, which should be far more, valuable. You don't want these criminals or what have you, just in your league and Tyreek Hill, and then you just you glorify them, and you don't
So
punish them as much. So
allow me some space here to lead you a little bit. It'll make sense, I promise. Shane Pinto, who we've talked about, what do you think his contract would have been if he had signed? You can guesstimate.
Pinto, yeah,
Probably
3-4 million. I don't know.
I don't know. I would say a little bit higher than that.
I would have said somewhere between maybe 5 and 6.
Yeah, me
Okay.
too.
All right.
Over, like a 5 to a 6 year deal. I think they may have been saying something about that, right? So a 41 game suspension, and we can just say 5 million. We'll go on the low side of that. A 41 game suspension is $2.5 million he would have forfeited to the NHL, would have been $500,000 more of a fine than the Blackhawks received.
Right.
Charlie McAvoy's 4-game suspension that he just received, he has to forego $200,000, a tenth of the Blackhawks fine.
Of the Blackhawks fine. Yeah. I mean, that puts it into perspective there.
And if we want to go even further into the absurdity of the NHL, they made up the fucking rules as they went with the Shane Pinto suspension. He is not under contract. And they are saying that his 41 game suspension counted at the beginning of the year, even though he wasn't going to be playing anyway, and are letting it count, even though he's not under actual contract.
Right. Should start when he
signed him. They would have been stuck with that $5 million cap hit on their books for 41 games and do nothing about it. Right. So on one hand, you have to say the NHL is completely making it up. And you could argue one way or the other that they were, maybe trying to appease a new owner, or maybe they knew what they were about to do with this first round pick. And they made these concessions and brokered a deal with the NHLPA, and everybody signed their NDAs. And that's why nobody will talk about it. And then you whack them for the first round pick. Maybe Gary Bettman turns around to Andlauer after yesterday's press conference, says, you know what? Go fuck yourself. We let you off the hook, per se, in the Pinto situation, and really hung the punishment on the player himself to where the team didn't necessarily take the hit. And you're going to complain about the first round pick.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just.
But either way, the NHL completely made that up. And that has not happened before. It's bullshit. It's cap circumvention, really.
Yeah.
You should have made it so it starts when he signs a contract. If you want to sign him to a $775,000 1-year contract, go ahead.
Right. I mean, it happens in other sports, like with a PED suspension or so forth. You'd have to be signed. You'd have to, you wouldn't start the suspension until you're signed to a contract
to be eligible to play, which he was not eligible to play.
So it benefits Pinto, who wasn't going to play anyway, and it benefits the team, who doesn't have to suffer the cap hit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say it doesn't benefit Pinto at all because obviously he can't play, he can't make money. But the winners in that scenario is definitely the Senators.
Well, Pinto could go to the KHL, right, or somewhere. I mean, he could. Right?
No,
he's not under contract.
He would have to be loaned, so the team would have to loan him to the KHL.
Oh, so he's an RFA?
Correct.
Okay, so there's still rights.
Okay, the rights.
Right. All right. Before we go, I wanted to get your thoughts on this in-season tournament for the NBA and whether or not you'd like that for the NHL.